Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast. You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today, we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And we're back. I'm Zev Brenner. It's always a treat to have Professor Jonathan Sarna. He was with Brandeis University, just recently retired, a professor of American history. He has written or edited over 40 books, and he has his finger on the pulse historically about American and world Jewry. So, Professor, good to have you back again.
Always a joy to be with you.
Thank you. One of the things that piqued my interest was a new report that came out from Pew. Now, we lost 6 million Jews. I see reports 7 million Jews from before the Holocaust, but we've never recovered as far as replenishing the amount. You would have think in the amount of time we'd have replenished, but there are less Jews today than there were in 1939 when we took a census of Jews. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's hard to replenish a third of the Jewish people. We're close. Of course, depends how you count Jews, but both Pew and before them, using a somewhat different methodology, Sergio de la Pergola also observed that we had still not made up those Jews. We've made up quite a few, but not all. And look, outside of the Haredi and the Orthodox community, Jews are not reproducing themselves. We have as many Jews as we do, largely because Jews have been living much longer, and that's helped their numbers. But the demographic engine of the diaspora Jewish community, say the American Jewish community, is really the Haredi, which have about almost 6 children, and the Orthodox, which have about 3 point some. But they're the only groups that reproduce, and many Reform and Jews, so-called Jews of no religion. Many of them either don't marry or don't have children. So it's hard to make up numbers when that is the situation, although anyone who looks carefully will see that in 50 years, the demographic makeup of American Jewry will look very different, because already, say, in New York, the majority of children are Haredi Orthodox, and in 50 years, we will feel that difference. The number of older American Jews who are Haredi Orthodox, less than 10%. When you move down the ages, say to the number less than 20 years of age, their numbers greatly increase.
Now, before the Holocaust in 1939, there were 16.6 million Jews alive. According to the Pew report, today is 14.8 million Jews. But how do you define a Jew? Because I see American Jew. If I was to say, Professor Sarna, how many American Jews are there? I've seen 6 million. I've seen 5.5. I've seen 7 million figures. How do we determine?
Well, my favorite of all the Pew studies, it's only available online, had different options. You told Pew how you wanted to define a Jew. Is it anyone who claims to be Jewish? Is it someone with a Jewish mother? And so on and so forth. And is it a Jew by religion? And that's one of the issues in this new study. They were counting people by religion. A lot of Jews tell Pew, I'm Jewish by ethnicity, by culture, but not by religion. They weren't counted. So it's not at all easy in America. I have to say, most scholars in America count anyone who claims to be Jewish. And that's why the numbers are higher. But there are plenty of people who claim to be Jewish, who, let's say, the chief rabbi wouldn't recognize as Jewish in Israel. And for that reason, someone like Sergio in Israel says, wait a minute, we have to compare apples to apples. If you're counting in Israel only the people who are recognized by the rabbinate as Jewish, then why do you count under different rules in America? But of course, we don't have a ministry of religion keeping tabs on people, and so it's much easier just to ask people. And in the diaspora, there was a kind of assumption for a long time that only someone who was Jewish would say they were Jewish, so we didn't have to worry about it. But today, it's perfectly clear that there are many, I don't know how many, people who tell pollsters that they're Jewish, but their relationship to the Jewish community is one parent or maybe only a grandparent, what some people call law of return Jews, rather than halachic Jews.
Now, before the Holocaust, Jews were scattered all over the world. The demographics have changed because most Jews are now more, well, it's easier to find them in let's say, America or in Israel, those regions, than, let's say, the rest of the world. It's a lot less Jews in those countries, even though Germany, I believe, is growing as far as more Jews living in Germany today, moving in there.
It's complicated. First of all, I'm so glad you noticed. It's one of the great secrets of post-war Jewish life. There's been a tremendous, unprecedented consolidation of world Jewry, and we're close. There's a dispute whether it's happened or will happen. Close to 90% of world Jewry living either in Israel or in North America. In a way, we have to go back to when there was Babylon and Jerusalem, Bavel v'Yerushalayim, for such a high percentage of Jews to be in just two places. Right after World War II, half the diaspora, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, you had in Africa, a large community in South Africa, and so on. Every one of those communities, Eastern Europe down to, I don't know, 100, depends what day it is, 100,000. South Africa is maybe a third of what it once was. Latin America, the largest community of Latin American Jews today is Miami. And, whole communities like Venezuela, have moved. So that's a very different demographic from the days when I began my career, and there was a real sense of world Jewry, and you had to compare different Jewish communities in the diaspora. Today, Chabad may be everywhere, but Jews are basically in North America and Israel.
I want to get back to something you said before. The truth is the engine that's driving the growth is the Haredi community. And I know that you mentioned what's average 6 kids to a Haredi family, about 3 to a modern Orthodox family.
It's supposed to be something like that, 5 to 6. Different subgroups have different numbers, but it's off the charts different than the average American Jew. And as I say, the modern Orthodox are more than replacing themselves. And look, this is not complicated. You go to any synagogue in any community, walk in to the Reform Temple, the Conservative, the Orthodox, and do your own little census. of how many children are around. And always, at least in my experience, there are many more in the Orthodox, in the Haredi. So, that's a big change as well from when we hardly paid attention to the numbers of Haredi Jews after World War II. There was a sense, well, they're refugees, but their children will be like everybody else. But it didn't quite turn out that way.
That's what they expected. Well, that happened in Israel too. They expected in 1948 that the religious exemption for yeshivas would only be temporarily because they would be replaced by more secular Israelis. They were proven wrong. Are the demographics in Israel similar as far as Haredi? Because I believe they're not really modern Orthodox, the Mizrahi type Jews, those also have high number of children. Unlike the modern Orthodox in America, they're much bigger.
But Israel may be the only first world country that more than replaces, that is, that have even secular Jews in Israel tend to have a third child, and of course, Haredim many more there. So, and you feel it. You go to Israel, and it feels like a much younger country, because really it is. The average age is very young. And that's why there are certainly demographers who think that Israel will certainly be the largest Jewish community in the world.
But it hasn't surpassed the United States.
If it more than in the U.S. Some people think it's already happened. That's back to
the numbers. Think about the numbers in Rosh Hashanah, Jewish New Year. Aren't they about 7 or 8 million Jews in Israel at this moment in time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something like that. Again, it's who you count and how you count. But there's little doubt that Israel will be, if not already, the largest Jewish community. And that, too, you got to go back very far in Jewish history for when the largest center of Jewish life was in Israel. So big changes have taken place in our lifetime, and we haven't always paid attention to them.
Our guest is historian, Professor Jonathan Sarna. He's written over 40 books, relatively close to those amount of books, and he's been at Brandeis University, just recently retired. By the way, has October 7th changed on campus in Brandeis for you and other professors?
Well, I'm proud to say that the administration at Brandeis made clear that they were going to make sure that the students felt safe. And many of our students, I spoke to them, they thought they won the jackpot. And when a bunch of outsiders, I know they were outsiders because the university had some of them arrested and they weren't Brandeis students, came to campus right after October 7th. Brandeis, unlike some of our neighbors, did have them arrested. And that sent a message. Now, that doesn't mean that every faculty member would have voted for Prime Minister Netanyahu. And we certainly had faculty who thought Brandeis was much too supportive of Israel. But in terms of feeling safe, which was certainly the highest priority of all of us, I was then still there and quite actively involved. The university was very concerned to make sure that it was safe. It spent a lot of money on safety. And I will say, and I think it was a statement They not only gave me an honorary degree when I retired, but I was the speaker, and I certainly mentioned Israel, mentioned the hostages, and I think they were not surprised at that. So far, thank God, I think, if anything, October 7th reminded people why there is a Brandeis. It's not the same as Yeshiva University, but when you compare Brandeis to our neighbors in the Boston area, Harvard, MIT, Tufts, there's no comparison. And I certainly had people who visited me on the campus, and one of them, took out a Jewish symbol, said, "Oh, here I can wear it and feel safe. I would never dare wear this on my campus."
No, it's
Which
unfortunate.
gives sense. Yeah.
Unfortunate. Even though demographically it'd be interesting to see if Orthodox Jewish students will go less to prestigious universities like Harvard, Barnard, Columbia, etc., because of October 7th. Also, these colleges don't really want Orthodox or Jewish students. They want to diversify, correct, Professor?
Well, that certainly was the case. It will be interesting. Some of them have signed agreements, and they know people are counting now. No, they're about half as many Orthodox students, I hear, in places like Harvard and University of Pennsylvania than there used to be. We see more and more Jewish students in places that we didn't. Vanderbilt, a very good school. Tulane, which is about 20% Jewish. University of Florida in Gainesville may well now be the largest Jewish community anywhere. Texas has a lot of Jews. So there are changes there as well. I think there are still, and understandably so, students who feel going to an Ivy school, even if it's difficult, I'll be able to write my ticket. And there are, some, not all the Ivies are the same. Yale did better. Princeton, in some areas, has been better. But in any case, the world of the university has changed a lot, and nobody would have predicted 20 years ago that the first question parents and students would ask is, will I be safe on that college campus as a Jew? And today, that is certainly a question that people ask.
Certainly is. Now, I'm curious. We have in New York City somebody by the name of Amdani, who's an anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, and the Jewish, according to some of the Jewish political power is waning in New York, even though you have Haredim growing and they're a growing force, but the political power is waning. I want to get your perspective on this, where we have even 20% of Jews voted for somebody who's anti-Israel, and you also have the feeling that Jews are losing our clout politically.
Yeah, I mean, that number 20%, I think actually across the board, 20% of Jews no longer support Israel, and many of those Jews, when you look carefully, are products of intermarriage, not all. But that number is today the number we talk about. I like to remind people that it was approximately the same number of Jews who supported communism, something we never talk about, in the 1930s. They thought that Stalin was a hero. I have a picture which I show my class of a parade down New York, Fifth Avenue, carrying Lenin and Stalin pictures, and some of those Yiddish camps in those days had big pictures of those folks. And actually, there were Jews who went back to the
Russia.
Soviet Union. It was hard in America in the 30s, in the Depression. In 1986, when I visited what we used to call refuseniks, Jews who couldn't get out of the Soviet Union, one of them admitted to me that his mother had returned to the Soviet Union from the United States. He wanted to use that as a reason that they should let him out. So it's not so new as we
But
imagine.
there's a difference, Professor Sarna, because Jews who may have supported communism and believed in the utopia is not the same as voting for somebody who is anti-Israel, wants to strangle Israel, believes in BDS, believes in free Palestine. So the difference between that and between those that were socialists and communists, I think it's worse today.
Maybe, Stalin certainly wanted to murder the Jewish people, but it's a race to the bottom.
Right, but I don't think most Jews realized that it came out later in the 50s. He killed the Jewish
and I
poets.
think a lot of people don't realize, some of us have learned that when people talk about erasing the state of Israel, we should believe them, but some always think it's not. I think it will be a very important election. It will really let us see where power is in New York and who holds it. I think there is concern in the Jewish community, as we see, especially in New York, so-called progressives. But this is a big threat, but we'll see what happens.
Right. Maybe the rest of the question will be is how the Haredi Orthodox community will register to vote, be more involved than they are right now in the political process. The question is, can that change? And this may be a wake-up call for more involvement of that community in the political arena.
It may well be. Don't underestimate how many Orthodox Jews, including Haredi Jews, have moved away to Florida. You feel it there, and anyone who goes to Florida hears that there are not enough schools, they can't find teachers, and so on. When I say Florida, I mean, of course, South Florida, somewhere between Miami, Boca, West Palm, that area. That will soon be the largest Jewish community overtaking California. And that's much more Orthodox, much more politically right-wing. And especially for Jews with children, the day schools are much cheaper, partly because of state benefits, and now it looks like there'll be federal benefits. And I think many people are taking advantage of those benefits and realizing, I met people there who say, well, I fly up once every other week, but I still save a great deal of money. So it remains to be seen, but I study change over time in the American Jewish community, and we're seeing a lot of changes, more than many of us realize.
And if Madamni wins, Florida might be the winner with more Jews and more.
Yes, I think there will be.
Florida. You mentioned
and we've heard from people who said that they would leave. Of course, there are already many wealthy Jews not living in the metropolitan city, meaning if you live in Teaneck and so on, you may be near New York, but you're not living in New York. You can't vote in New York. But I suspect that some of those people whom he has threatened that he will tax them, I mean, that's what his idea is. Somebody's got to pay. I think some of those people will pick up and move elsewhere. And look, we saw some of this in San Francisco. There aren't Haredi and Orthodox Jews in large numbers in San Francisco, but the out-migration of wealthy folks from San Francisco had a huge impact. And that's why Mr. Lurie suddenly became the mayor, to try and bring things back a little bit like once New Yorkers put in Mr. Giuliani after an earlier experiment. So we'll see what happens, but I think a lot of eyes are going to be on that election and on how Jews vote.
Well, 3 months we have left. You mentioned the changing demographics of American Jews. How big of a factor is Chabad in shaping American Jewry?
Well, I mean, what's amazing about Chabad is its influence on non-Haredi Jews. You go to a Chabad shul, and many of the people there are folks who you might once have seen in a conservative synagogue when I was young. And in some areas, Florida, again, is a very good example. There are huge numbers of Chabad congregations. I looked carefully at that study, and it's fascinating because one of the first studies that counted Chabad, and you can see clearly the conservative movement lost and Chabad gained. Now, it's hard to know, are they Chabadniks in their self-identity? That's not of interest to Chabad. Chabad wants to touch people. It's not so interested in whether they call themselves followers of Chabad. So, in some ways, the traditional means of counting don't apply to Chabad, but Chabad is in a different category than, say, I don't know, bells, because Chabad is really out there working with the totality of the Jewish people whom they want to educate, whereas many Haredi communities wanted to build walls so that their children would not be influenced by the outside world. Chabad did the opposite strategy, what the Rebbe called ufaratzta. He goes out into the world and wants to transform it. We're probably lucky to have both in terms of the totality of their influence.
Well, we're seeing a change. You mentioned Bells in Israel. They have a TV channel which goes way beyond their community. I believe it's Hidabrut. In fact, they even approached me about coming to the United States, which hasn't happened. But I think we're seeing a change where even the most insular Hasidim realize you can't be insular and they have to interact. And the internet is a great case in point. No matter how many rallies you have against the internet, even the good Israel of America embraced, like a drunken sailor, embrace the internet.
Yeah. Triumph, and look,
If we just higher your volume, your voice becoming a little low. Yes.
the digital revolution
I think your volume just became low. If you just increase your volume. Professor Jonathan Sarna is our guest. We're looking at American Jewry. I guess now it's better. Yeah, it's better. Go ahead, Professor. Yeah.
Yeah, is I think you'll find that the digital revolution will turn out to be as important as printing revolution. By the way, there were people who opposed printing. That's why there's some things that remained in manuscript. But ultimately, printing won, and we will look back at digitization for all of its dangers, which are clearly very great, as no less a revolution. And in the world of Jewish scholarship, where I spend a lot of time, it's amazing the discoveries that people are making using new digital technology. And many of the people making those discoveries are Orthodox and even Haredi Jews there. So I don't have any doubt that the digital revolution is impacting very broadly.
Professor Jonathan Sarna, what is your next book going to be about? I know we covered Ulysses Grant and the Jews and the anti-Semitism in New York hundreds of years ago. What's your next book?
My next book will be on Mark Twain and the Jews, full of surprises. I have a lot of new things, even though there's, I know, a best-selling book of 1,000 pages on Mark Twain. He didn't spend much time on Jews, and I know a lot of things, I've discovered a lot of things that will greatly surprise people.
I think he went to Israel in the 18, when he got to Israel and discovered that there weren't that many Arabs there, right?
Yeah. By the way, that was also about technology. We don't appreciate how much steam changed the world, and the first steamboat, so I know when I'm leaving, when I'm returning, I'm safe, was Mark Twain's Innocents Abroad. Was the first time you had a boat that left from America on a luxury visit, and that's really the beginning of mass tourism to the land of Israel. You know, in 1800, when American Jews talked about, Shana Haba, we'll go next year to Jerusalem, they thought it would be magic. I'll go on a cloud. I'll go on eagle's wings. By 1870, just one lifetime away, everybody knew how I'll go to the land of Israel. I'll get on a steamboat. I know when I'm going, when I'm coming. And that changed many things, but Mark Twain book greatly accelerated the desire for world travel in the United States. And, people who go to Israel should realize that they, in a sense, are standing on the shoulders of Mark Twain. Before he went on that trip and wrote about it, it was extremely difficult and very rare. Later, it becomes common. So
Professor,
that's a teaser. Yeah.
We'll look forward to having you back when the book comes out. Professor Jonathan Sarna, American History Professor Emeritus at Brandeis University, written over or edited over 40 different books. And we're looking forward to Mark Twain and the Jews. Thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.